A hat, a decision, and an unseen conflict. Los Angeles was buzzing as usual on that late afternoon, the hum of the city a backdrop to its unending display of wealth, culture, and ambition. Amid the chaos of its bustling streets, Barron Trump, now 18 years old, stepped out of a sleek black SUV. He had chosen to spend his day indulging in one of his quieter hobbies, reading, at a local library, tucked away from the glitz of Hollywood. Now, hunger gnawed at him, and he decided to treat himself to lunch at one of his favorite spots, La Terrace. La Terrace was more than a restaurant. It was an institution, known for its minimalist decor, artisanal dishes, and clientele that read like a who's who of Los Angeles. It was the type of place where appearances mattered. The waitstaff moved with practiced precision, the lighting was adjusted to flatter, and the air carried the subtle notes of fresh basil and aged wine. Barron, dressed in a crisp polo shirt and jeans, wore his bright red "Make America Great Again" hat without a second thought. To him, the hat was more than a political statement. It was a reminder of his family and the values they held dear. The hat had sparked conversations, debates, and even occasional arguments, but Barron had long learned to wear it with a calm, quiet confidence. As he stepped inside the restaurant, the cool air enveloped him, a relief from the heat outside. A polished hostess greeted him with a smile that faltered ever so slightly when her eyes landed on his hat. She recovered quickly, leading him to a small table in the corner, near the window. "Enjoy your meal, sir," she said, placing the menu before him. Barron thanked her and took a seat, glancing at the menu though he already knew what he wanted. La Terrace made an excellent Wagyu beef burger, and he was looking forward to it. Unbeknownst to Barron, his entrance had not gone unnoticed. The restaurant manager, a sharply dressed man in his mid-40s named Nathan Crowley, observed him from a distance. Nathan prided himself on maintaining an atmosphere of sophistication and exclusivity. He had a personal rule: no politics in his restaurant. Nathan's gaze lingered on Barron's hat, the bright red standing out against the restaurant's muted tones. It wasn't the first time he'd dealt with politically charged apparel, but this hat, this symbol, felt different. The sight of it immediately sparked a sense of unease in him. "This is a neutral space," Nathan murmured to a server standing nearby. "I won't let that hat disrupt our atmosphere." "But isn't he?" The server began hesitantly, her eyes darting toward Barron. "I don't care who he is," Nathan interrupted, his tone firm. "Rules are rules." Barron, oblivious to the brewing tension, relaxed into his seat, scrolling through his phone as he waited for the server. The atmosphere in the restaurant was serene, as always, with diners speaking in hushed tones and the occasional clink of silverware against porcelain. That peace was broken when Nathan approached. His polished shoes clicked against the hardwood floor as he made his way to Barron's table, his expression a careful blend of authority and civility. "Excuse me, sir," Nathan began, his voice carrying just enough volume to turn a few heads. Barron looked up, setting his phone aside. "Yes?" Nathan gestured toward the hat. "We have a policy here against political apparel. I'm going to have to ask you to remove it." For a moment, Barron was taken aback. He hadn't anticipated this. He had worn the hat countless times before, even in similar establishments without issue. "I wasn't aware of that policy," he replied, his tone even. "It's part of our code of conduct," Nathan insisted, though his vague gesture toward the entrance failed to indicate any visible sign stating such a rule. "We strive to maintain a neutral environment for all our guests." Barron tilted his head slightly, studying Nathan. He could feel the weight of the room's attention on him, the subtle stares, and not so subtle whispers. He had no intention of causing a scene, but he also wasn't inclined to compromise his principles. "I'm not here to make a statement," Barron said calmly. "I just came for lunch." Nathan's posture stiffened. "The hat, sir. It's non-negotiable." For a brief moment, Barron considered his options. He could argue, stand his ground, and demand his right to stay. But as his father often told him, Sometimes the most powerful response was restraint. With a nod, Barron rose from his seat, his movements unhurried. "If that's how you feel, I'll leave," he said, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable edge of disappointment. The restaurant fell silent as Barron gathered his things and walked toward the door. He didn't look back, though he could feel the eyes of every diner on him. The glass door closed softly behind him, but the tension inside the restaurant lingered, heavy and unspoken. Outside, the warm California breeze greeted Barron as he adjusted his hat, reaffirming his decision to wear it. He wasn't angry. Frustration simmered beneath the surface, but he refused to let it consume him. He walked a few blocks to a nearby park, finding a quiet bench shaded by an old oak tree. Pulling out his phone, he began to type a message to his mother. "Hey, Mom. Got kicked out of La Terrace because of the hat. All good, just wanted to let you know." The response was almost immediate. "What? Are you okay? That's unacceptable." Barron chuckled softly, imagining his mother pacing the room, her protective instincts kicking in. "I'm fine. Just needed some fresh air anyway." As he sat there, his phone buzzed with messages from friends he had also texted. Their reactions ranged from outrage to disbelief. "That's crazy," one wrote. "You handled it better than I would have," said another. Barron's gaze drifted toward the skyline, his thoughts churning. He wasn't one to hold grudges, but the incident gnawed at him. It wasn't just about the hat. It was about respect, understanding, and the growing divide he saw in the world. An idea began to take shape in his mind, not one born out of anger, but out of a desire to bridge gaps and spark conversation. Maybe, just maybe, this moment could be turned into something meaningful. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Barron stood, his resolve solidifying. This wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. The ripple effect. As Barron Trump left the park, his steps were steady, but his mind raced with a mixture of emotions. While the incident at La Terrace had been brief, it had left a deep impression on him. The question lingered. Why had his hat, a simple piece of clothing, sparked such a reaction? It wasn't the first time he'd encountered criticism for wearing it, but this moment felt different, more personal, more public. Barron decided to head home. As he stepped into the family's residence in Beverly Hills, a place both luxurious and surprisingly warm, his mother, Melania, was waiting for him in the kitchen. She was dressed casually, her sharp eyes softening when she saw him. "I got your message," she said, her Slovenian accent wrapping around the words. "Tell me everything." Barron sighed, setting his hat on the counter. "I walked in, sat down, and the manager came over to tell me I couldn't wear the hat because of some policy. He told me to take it off or leave. So, I left." Melania's expression hardened. "Did he say why? Was there a sign? Anything?" "No sign, no warning," Barron replied. "Just the manager deciding the hat wasn't welcome." Melania reached for her phone. "This is unacceptable. I will call the owner myself." "Mom, no," Barron interrupted, placing a hand on hers. "I don't want to escalate this. It's not about making a scene or fighting back." "Then what do you want to do?" she asked, her tone softening. Barron thought for a moment, the weight of the incident settling over him. "I want to use this to start a conversation. Not just about the hat, but about respect. About how we treat people we don't agree with." Melania studied her son, her pride evident in her expression. "You've grown into a fine young man, Barron. I'm proud of you, but you must be careful. The world will twist this into something it's not." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm going to be thoughtful about it." Later that evening, Barron sat in his room, drafting a post for social media. He wasn't particularly active online, but he knew the power of words and the reach of the platforms at his disposal. He wanted to be clear, calm, and above all, respectful. After several revisions, he settled on a simple message. "Today, I was asked to leave a restaurant because of my MAGA hat. I chose to leave without argument because I believe respect goes both ways. We may not always agree, but we should strive to treat each other with kindness and understanding. Differences don't have to divide us. Satisfied, Barron posted it to his Instagram and Twitter accounts, attaching a picture of the hat sitting on his desk. He turned off his phone, not wanting to obsess over the immediate reactions, and headed downstairs for dinner with his family. The next morning, Barron woke to find his post had gone viral. The message had been shared thousands of times, with reactions pouring in from all corners of the internet. Supporters praised his composure and maturity, while critics dissected every word, some accusing him of using the incident to make a political statement. He scrolled through the comments, a mixture of encouragement and vitriol. One caught his eye. "We need more people like you willing to approach differences with respect. Thank you for reminding us that kindness matters." It was from a teacher in Kansas, someone he'd never met, but whose words resonated deeply. Barron decided to respond, writing, "Thank you for your kind words. I believe we can all learn from each other if we're willing to listen." Meanwhile, at Les Terrasses, the fallout from the incident was beginning to take shape. Word of what had happened spread quickly, fueled by Barron's post and the discussions it sparked. The restaurant's phone rang constantly, with callers expressing everything from outrage to support for the manager's actions. Nathan Crowley, the manager, sat in his office, staring at the screen of his laptop. His inbox was flooded with emails, and his social media accounts were inundated with messages. Some praised him for taking a stand, while others condemned him for what they saw as discrimination. The restaurant's owner, Julia Daniels, arrived that afternoon, her expression a mix of concern and frustration. Julia was a seasoned businesswoman who valued her establishment's reputation above all else. "Nathan," she said, stepping into his office, "we need to talk." Nathan looked up, his face weary. "I assume this is about the Trump kid." "Yes, it is," Julia replied, her tone sharp. "What were you thinking? Do you have any idea the kind of attention this is bringing us?" "I was enforcing our policy," Nathan said defensively. "What policy?" Julia snapped. "We don't have a written rule about political apparel. You made that decision on your own." Nathan hesitated, realizing the precariousness of his position. "I thought it was in the best interest of the restaurant." That hat belongs to a customer," Julia interrupted. "A customer who was treated poorly and walked out because of your actions. Do you know how many people have called to cancel reservations because of this?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, his confidence wavering. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to fix this," Julia said firmly. "Reach out to him, apologize, and make it right." That evening, Barron received an unexpected email from Les Terrasses. It was a message from Nathan Crowley, expressing regret for how the situation had been handled and extending an invitation to return as their guest. Barron read the email carefully, appreciating the gesture but unsure how to respond. He decided to consult his father, knowing he would offer valuable advice. "Dad," Barron began over the phone. "The restaurant reached out. They apologized and want me to come back." Donald Trump's voice was warm but direct. "What do you think, Barron? Do you want to go back?" "I'm not sure," Barron admitted. "Part of me feels like accepting could set an example, but I don't want it to seem like I'm endorsing what happened." "Well," his father said, "you have an opportunity here. If you think it'll lead to something constructive, it might be worth considering. Just remember, you don't owe them anything." Barron nodded, taking his father's words to heart. He decided to sleep on it, knowing the choice he made would carry weight far beyond himself. As the city of Los Angeles buzzed with debate over the incident, Barron's decision loomed large. The story had grown into something much bigger than a teenager and a hat. It had become a flashpoint for conversations about identity, politics, and civility. Barron, however, remained calm, grounded by the values instilled in him by his family. He understood the significance of the moment and resolved to use it not for division, but for unity. The invitation. Barron Trump woke up the following morning to a sense of clarity. The invitation from Les Terrasses weighed heavily on his mind, not as a source of pressure, but as an opportunity to address something larger than himself. For Barron, this wasn't about the MAGA hat or even the restaurant. It was about setting an example for how differences could be navigated with grace and understanding. His decision came quickly. He would return to the restaurant, but on his terms. As Barron formulated his response, he called on his older siblings for advice. Eric and Ivanka, both seasoned in navigating public scrutiny, listened carefully as he explained the situation. "It's a gutsy move to go back," Eric said, his tone thoughtful. "But if anyone can do it with class, it's you." Ivanka chimed in, her voice full of encouragement. "This could be a chance to show everyone what it means to rise above. Be kind, but stand firm in your beliefs, and make sure it's clear that you're not seeking revenge or even validation, just understanding." Buoyed by their support, Barron crafted his reply to the restaurant. He thanked the manager for reaching out and agreed to return, but with a condition: the meeting would not be private. He wanted to sit down with the manager in full view of the other patrons, not to embarrass anyone, but to emphasize that such conversations should be open and transparent. Nathan Crowley, the manager, hesitated when he read the response. The idea of a public meeting made him uneasy, but the restaurant owner, Julia Daniels, encouraged him to accept. "You created this mess, Nathan," she said bluntly. "This is your chance to show people you can own up to it. If you handle it well, it could even be good for business." Reluctantly, Nathan agreed. The day of the meeting arrived, and Les Terraces was bustling with activity. Word of Barron's return had spread quickly, drawing curious diners and media alike. Cameras lined the street outside, though Barron had declined interviews, insisting that his focus was on the conversation inside. As Barron entered the restaurant, wearing the same MAGA hat that had sparked the controversy, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to him, but his expression remained calm and confident. He was accompanied by a close friend and a family assistant, both of whom stayed discreetly in the background. Nathan Crowley was waiting near the hostess stand, visibly nervous. He extended a hand as Barron approached. "Mr. Trump," Nathan began, his voice tentative, "thank you for agreeing to come back. I'd like to personally apologize for what happened." Barron shook his hand firmly but said, "Let's talk at the table." Seated in a central spot, the two began their conversation, the hum of the restaurant noticeably quieter as patrons strained to overhear. Nathan started by explaining his perspective. "When I saw the hat," Nathan said, "I thought it might upset other guests. I wanted to maintain a neutral space, but I realize now that I overstepped. It wasn't my place to judge or assume." Barron listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Nathan finished, Barron took a deep breath before responding. "I appreciate your apology," Barron said, "but I think this is about more than a hat. The moment we start excluding people for expressing themselves, whether through a hat, a shirt, or their words, we lose something important. Respect doesn't mean agreeing with everyone. It means giving them the space to be themselves." Nathan looked down, visibly moved by the young man's maturity. "You're right. I let my own assumptions get in the way. I hope you can forgive me." "I do," Barron replied, his voice steady. "And I hope this can be a reminder for all of us, myself included, that respect has to go both ways." As the conversation unfolded, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. Patrons who had initially come out of curiosity now watched with genuine admiration. Barron's composure and eloquence surprised many, leaving even the skeptics with little to criticize. Julia Daniels, the owner, watched from a distance, her respect for Barron growing with each passing moment. She knew this encounter would shape the restaurant's reputation for years to come. When the conversation ended, Barron and Nathan shook hands once more. Nathan's expression was one of genuine gratitude, and Barron's calm demeanor hadn't wavered. Before leaving, Barron addressed the room, his voice carrying just enough to reach every corner. "I hope this shows that even when we disagree, we can find common ground through kindness and understanding. That's something my parents taught me, and it's something I try to live by." The room erupted into applause, not because of who Barron was, but because of what he represented in that moment, a willingness to bridge divides rather than deepen them. As Barron stepped out into the afternoon sun, the cameras outside swarmed. He gave a brief statement, repeating the sentiment he had shared inside, before slipping into a waiting car. Social media lit up almost immediately, with hashtags like #KindnessMatters and #BarronSpeaks trending across platforms. While opinions remained divided, the majority praised Barron for his grace under pressure and his ability to turn a divisive moment into one of reconciliation. That night, as Barron scrolled through his phone, he felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The messages pouring in from strangers, both supportive and critical, didn't faze him. What mattered was that he had stayed true to himself and his principles. His mother poked her head into his room, smiling. "You did good, Barron." "Thanks, Mom," he replied, setting his phone down. For Barron Trump, the incident at Les Terrasses wasn't just a moment of conflict. It was a chance to show the world that even the smallest actions, when done with kindness and respect, could leave a lasting impact. The ripple effect. The days following Barron Trump's encounter at Les Terrasses were anything but ordinary. While Barron himself resumed his daily routine, the world seemed to grow increasingly fascinated with the young man who had handled a potentially explosive situation with such poise. News outlets dissected every moment of the meeting. From cable television to online platforms, commentators analyzed his choice of words, his calm demeanor, and the unexpected maturity he displayed. Social media buzzed with opinions, many lauding his grace, while others questioned the sincerity of both sides. Barron, however, kept his focus on what truly mattered to him, using the experience to foster positive change. On the third morning after the incident, Barron's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Julia Daniels, the owner of Les Terrasses. She wanted to meet with him privately to discuss an idea she had. Intrigued, Barron agreed, and they arranged to meet at a small cafe, far from the spotlight. Julia greeted him warmly, her demeanor a blend of professionalism and genuine admiration. "Thank you for coming," she said as they settled at a corner table. "Of course," Barron replied. "What's on your mind?" Julia hesitated for a moment, as though weighing her words carefully. "The incident at my restaurant. It was a wake-up call. Not just for Nathan, but for me as well. I've realized that we need to rethink how we approach inclusion and dialogue in spaces like Les Terrasses, and I think you could help us do that." Barron leaned in, intrigued. "What I'm proposing," Julia continued, "is a partnership. I'd like to host a series of events at the restaurant, open forums where people from all walks of life can come together to discuss difficult topics in a respectful way. Politics, culture, identity. Nothing is off the table, and I want you to be the first guest speaker." Barron blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Why me?" Julia smiled. "Because you've already shown that you can navigate these conversations with grace and humility. That's exactly the kind of tone I want to set for these events." Barron considered the proposal. He had never seen himself as a public speaker, much less a mediator of complex debates, but the idea resonated with him. If he could use his platform to encourage understanding, wasn't that worth stepping out of his comfort zone? "I'll do it," he said finally, "on one condition. The focus has to be on listening, not just talking. These forums should be about hearing each other out, not scoring points." Julia nodded. "Agreed. Let's make it happen." The first forum was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Julia and her team worked tirelessly to transform Les Terrasses into a space suited for meaningful dialogue. They rearranged the dining area to create a circular seating arrangement, fostering a sense of equality and openness. Invitations went out to a diverse group of community leaders, activists, students, and everyday citizens. Barron spent the weeks leading up to the event preparing. He read extensively on topics like effective communication, conflict resolution, and empathy. He even sought advice from his mother, Melania, who encouraged him to stay authentic. "You don't have to have all the answers," she told him. "Just focus on creating a space where people feel heard." The night of the event, Les Terrasses was packed. The atmosphere buzzed with a mix of anticipation and curiosity. Media presence was minimal. Julia had insisted that the event remain as private and intimate as possible. Barron arrived early, dressed simply in a blazer and jeans. He was nervous but determined, reminding himself that this wasn't about him. It was about the conversations that needed to happen. Julia introduced him to the crowd, her words filled with gratitude and respect. "Tonight," she said, "we begin something new, a space where dialogue takes precedence over division. And none of this would be happening without Barron Trump." The room erupted into applause as Barron took the microphone. Barron began by sharing his perspective on the incident at the restaurant, framing it as a learning experience for everyone involved. He spoke candidly about the importance of mutual respect and the need to resist the urge to judge others based on appearances or assumptions. "I'm not here to tell anyone what to believe," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here to say that even when we disagree, we owe it to each other to listen. That's how we grow, not just as individuals, but as a community." The audience responded warmly, and the discussion soon opened up. People from all walks of life shared their stories and perspectives, some emotional, others challenging. A local teacher spoke about fostering empathy in her classroom. A young activist shared their struggles with being misunderstood. Even Nathan Crowley, the restaurant manager, took the floor to apologize once more and reflect on his own biases. Throughout it all, Barron listened intently, occasionally guiding the conversation, but mostly letting it flow naturally. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere in the room was electric. Strangers who had entered with opposing views were now exchanging ideas and even phone numbers. Julia, watching from the sidelines, felt a profound sense of pride. As the night wound down, Barron closed the event with a simple message. "This is just the beginning," he said. "If we can take what we've done here tonight and carry it into our everyday lives, we'll be making the world a little better, one conversation at a time." The crowd erupted into a standing ovation. Walking out of the restaurant that night, Barron felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just a response to a single incident, it was the start of something much bigger. And for the first time, he felt truly at peace with the path he was carving for himself.